Hey guys, tonight we're going somewhere a little different. We're heading back, way back. Back to the Pleistocene epoch, the last great ice age, a time of immense, terrifying, and utterly magnificent creatures. We're talking about a world where you could walk out your back door in what is now Los Angeles and see an animal the size of a modern elephant covered in shaggy fur, standing on its hind legs to pluck leaves from a tree. And you'd see a cat the size of a Siberian tiger, with two razor-sharp, dagger-like fangs hanging from its mouth. You'd be a snack. A warm, meaty, probably delicious snack if you're lucky. You probably wouldn't survive this, not in that landscape, not among these titans. But what if for just a moment, a sliver of time before their world ended, they decided to get organized? What if, sensing the shift in the air, the vanishing of their food, and the arrival of a new two-legged species, they decided to form a government, a parliament? So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You find yourself in a misty, sprawling forest, the kind of place where the air hangs heavy with the scent of pine and damp earth. A low sun, pale and watery, struggles to cut through the haze. You're shivering, but not from the cold. You're shivering because you're standing at the edge of a clearing, and in the center of that clearing, a debate is beginning. On one side, a hulking figure of pure muscle and menace. This is Smilodon fatalis, the saber-toothed cat. His forelegs are proportionally longer than those of modern felines, and his build is more muscular, almost bear-like. Those famous canines, the things of nightmares and B-grade movies, are long, flat, and curved like daggers. You'd think an animal built for brute force would be all forward momentum, but this one is poised, watchful, its body radiating an immense coiled power. On the other side of the clearing, something even larger, even more improbable, stands with a placid, almost gentle air. This is the giant ground sloth, Megatherium americanum. This animal is an absolute unit, a true heavyweight of the Cenozoic era, weighing 3 or 4 tons and standing up to 20 feet long. To put that into perspective, it's about the size of a modern elephant. You can see the long claws on its front paws curving like scythes. For years, the purpose of those claws was a subject of intense speculation, with some paleontologists wondering if they were for hunting, digging up insect colonies, or just general intimidation. It's easy to imagine this shaggy beast as a peaceful, plodding herbivore. But those claws suggest a defense mechanism, a quiet power that you would be wise not to provoke. The central premise of this grand, bizarre gathering is a shared, undeniable crisis. The world is changing. The land is shifting beneath their massive feet, and an era is coming to a close. This is the Quaternary extinction event, a period that saw the disappearance of nearly all the large mammals you've ever wanted to see in a real-life zoo. Historians still argue whether the disappearance of these great beasts was primarily a result of climate change, human hunting, or a combination of both. The animals in our story have decided to find a third option. They've decided to discuss deliberate and perhaps legislate their way out of this impending doom. This is their parliament, and these two titans, the Smilodon and the Megatherium, are its first leaders. It's easy to see why. The saber-toothed cat is a symbol of predation, a hunter whose immense canines suggest a specialized killing machine. The ground sloth, on the other hand, is the ultimate herbivore, subsisting on an exclusively vegetarian diet. Despite its massive size and menacing claws, the fact that these two species coexisted is a well-documented mainstream fact, of the Pleistocene epoch, thanks in large part to a very sticky piece of real estate. The La Brea tar pits in Los Angeles, California, have yielded a stunning number of fossils of both Smilodon and various species of ground sloths, giving paleontologists a clear picture of their shared, if not always, peaceful habitat. The very ground beneath them holds the evidence of their shared world, a world that is now about to vanish. The air is thick with anticipation. You watch as the two animals eye each other across the clearing. The saber-toothed cat's intense gaze, his muscular frame poised to act. The ground sloth's calm, ponderous stare, its head large and bear-like. It's a clash of fundamental opposites, predator and prey speed and mass, and now it seems the legislative and the executive. You can almost hear the unstated question hanging in the air. Can a government founded on such ancient primal opposition ever hope to save a dying world? Or are they simply debating the best way to fall? You ease closer, hiding behind a thick-barked redwood, the air growing colder as the mist deepens. You can almost feel the presence of the two beasts as you watch them. The Smilodon is an impressive specimen, an absolute marvel of ancient engineering. Its body is shorter and more muscular than that of a modern lion or tiger. It's an ambush predator, evolved for a short, powerful burst of violence. But its most famous feature, those incredible saber canines, presents a bit of a contradiction. Paleontologists still do not know how saber-toothed animals like Smilodon hunted prey without breaking their unwieldy sabers. The consensus is that their canines, while immensely strong from front to back, were quite weak against sideways force. This suggests they were used for a precise stabbing or slashing attack to the throat or abdomen of a struggling, already subdued animal. You could say they were like the most expensive, most fragile steak knives in the world. There's a fascinating, almost comical developmental detail that might explain this paradox, the double-fanged adolescents. In a unique evolutionary twist, some evidence suggests that juvenile Smilodon held onto their baby teeth to help stabilize their growing permanent sabers for up to 30 months. Imagine the dental drama. It's as if evolution gave them training wheels, a protective brace, while the young cats learned to hunt without snapping off their most valuable assets. Eventually, the baby teeth would fall out, and the adult Smilodon would lose that support, presumably having already learned the care and handling of their deadly daggers. It's a testament to the idea that sometimes the best way to prepare for a big job is with a little extra support. The Megatherium, on the other hand, seems like an animal of pure, unyielding principle. For many years, those intimidating claws led people to wonder if it was a carnivore. But scientists have since used a different method analyzing the composition of carbon isotopes in fossilized bones, and the result is Megatherium was an exclusively vegetarian animal. Their diet was composed of grasses and leaves, which they likely stripped from trees with their large claws and prehensile tongues. You can almost picture this massive, shaggy beast standing up on its short, blunt tail and back legs to use its forelimbs to reach high into the trees. It's a far cry from the lazy, tree-dwelling creatures we know today. As they begin to speak, a low rumble coming from the sloth's throat and a deep growl from the cats, you begin to understand their differing worldviews. The word parliament, you remember, comes from the French parliament and the Latin parlamentum, a word first used by King Henry III in 1236 to indicate an assembly for discussion. And for these two, there is much to discuss. For the Smilodon, the central question is one of collective action. Paleontologists still argue whether the saber-toothed cat was a solitary hunter like a modern tiger or a social cat like a lion. The discovery of partially healed skeletal injuries at Rancho La Brea led some to believe they were social arguing that an injured animal would die without the help of a group. Others retort that a cat could heal on its own by using metabolic reserves and that dehydration would be a far greater threat than starvation. The question of their sociality is not just a scientific curiosity, it's a profound political question. Can a leader who may, in his very nature, be a lone wolf, be trusted to lead a collective? The ground sloth, for his part, represents a different kind of contradiction. He is massive, imposing, and looks like he should be slow. And while it is true that he was far from a speed demon, relying on his size and claws for defense rather than escape, some evidence suggests he could move with surprising speed when provoked, maybe as fast as a running elephant for short bursts. This goes against the common perception of these beasts, and it's a good lesson that a leisurely pace isn't the same as an inability to act. They might have a low metabolic rate like modern sloths, but that doesn't mean they just sat around all day. Their ability to stand bipedally combined with their dense pebble-like osteoderms embedded in their skin made them a walking fortress. The sloth's massive size and peaceful diet create a powerful political image, a principled, slow-to-act, but unshakable foundation for the parliament. The question is, will his unwavering, deliberate pace be enough to counter the sheer predatory charisma of the Smilodon? You watch as the other animals filter into the clearing, their breath misting in the cold air. The air of deliberation is gone, replaced by a growing urgency. They know in their bones that a crisis is coming. The world is getting warmer, the great ice sheets are retreating, and the lush, sprawling steppes of the past are vanishing. It's a crisis that paleontologists have been debating for decades, the Late Pleistocene extinction event, a period that saw the disappearance of countless megafaunal genera in North America. In our story, this event has a name, the Great Dying, and the animals are desperate to stop it. They break into 3 distinct factions, each with a different explanation for what is happening to their world. First, there is the Overkill Caucus. This group, made up primarily of the carnivores and other fast-moving predators, sees a clear culprit, the new 2-legged creature that has recently arrived from another continent. They point to the fact that these newcomers are skilled hunters and that the native Megafauna, having never encountered a human before, are not wary of them. This faction's political platform is simple. They believe the decline of the great herbivores is a direct result of this new predator's relentless hunting, and that the carnivores are suffering from a lack of prey. They argue that the only way to save their world is to unite and push back against this invading species. It's a compelling argument, but the evidence is tricky. After all, despite an estimated hundreds of millions of large mammals on the landscape, when humans arrived, there are only 16 known kill sites, and only 5 of the 38 extinct genera were even found in those sites. Second, you have the climate change block. This is the herbivore majority, and they see the problem not in a new predator, but in the ground beneath their feet. They argue that the world is becoming more seasonal, and the vegetation they rely on is shifting. They point to the vanishing of the unique mammoth steppe biome, which is being replaced by waterlogged peat and less nutritious shrubs. For them, the problem is a fundamental existential one. Their food source is dying out. They're not worried about being hunted. They're worried about starving. They would argue that their large bodies, which once helped them survive and retain heat, are now a liability, requiring far too much food and water. Their platform is one of conservation, of adapting to the new world by learning to thrive on the new plants and habitats. Finally, there's a fringe group, the Hyper-Disease Party. They argue that the problem is an invisible enemy, a plague brought unwittingly by the new two-legged creatures and their own commensals. They postulate that a virulent hyper-disease is racing through the native populations for which they have no natural immunity. This group is often mocked by the others who point out that there is no archaeological evidence of a major plague, and that a disease would likely affect animals of all sizes, not just the megafauna. Their political platform is one of quarantine and isolation, a hopeless position for a migratory species. The full scope of the disaster is truly massive. The extinction event, centered around 11,000 years before present, saw the disappearance of 32 genera of large mammals in North America alone. This is a mainstream historical fact, and its scale is almost unimaginable. Scientists still debate whether overkill or climate change was the primary driver of extinction, noting that the events broadly coincided with the arrival of humans, yet direct evidence of hunting is scarce for many species. It's a perfect political mirror. The lack of a clear single culprit allows each faction to blame the other, ensuring that no consensus is ever reached. There is a quirky but telling piece of evidence that suggests a broader ecological upheaval was at play. It wasn't just the large mammals that disappeared. The extinction event also claimed the lives of numerous bird genera, several tortoise species, and even a species of spruce. It seems that their world wasn't just dying. It was fundamentally changing in a way that affected every aspect of life, from the largest predator to the smallest plant. This wider context adds a new layer to the political debates. It suggests that neither the overkill caucus nor the climate change bloc has the full picture, and that their infighting might be a distraction from a much larger, more cosmic problem. As the animals get ready to elect their leaders and begin their debate, you can't help but wonder if they're fighting over the wrong things entirely. The air crackles. The animals have heard the arguments and now must choose their leaders. It's an election, a contest for control of a government designed to save them. The mammoth, wise and ancient, steps forward and bellows a call to order. In a sense, this is the very foundation of parliamentary government. The origins of Parliament date back to the Middle Ages, when the monarch would summon his richest and most powerful subjects. But in the 13th century, towns and counties began sending representatives, and the term Parliament was used to describe these assemblies. In this Pleistocene gathering, the mighty are summoning the powerful, but instead of burgesses and knights, they have saber-toothed cats and giant ground sloths. The Parliament, a swirling mix of fur and fang and horn, must now grapple with the three main functions of government first: lawmaking, creating the rules that govern their society; second, oversight, holding the executive branch accountable; and third, representation, voicing the concerns of their constituents. This is the heart of the matter. How does a Smilodon represent the interests of a herd of bison? How does a giant sloth express the needs of a mastodon? The concept is so bizarre it's almost a light joke. You can imagine a caucus of dire wolves arguing for the rights of scavenging, while a block of mammoths pushes for legislation to protect the integrity of the grasslands. It's a recipe for glorious, terrible chaos. First order of business, elect a presiding officer. The Speaker. The Smilodon steps forward. He is the obvious choice for the carnivore minority, his muscular build and fearsome reputation making him a natural leader. He has the institutional role of presiding officer and is also the partisan role of leader of the majority party conference. For the Smilodon, this means leading his caucus of carnivores while also maintaining order in the chamber. He will be responsible for recognizing members to speak, deciding on points of order, and steering the debate. You can almost picture him with a massive prehistoric gavel, a single swipe of his paw silencing any unruly debate. The election is a foregone conclusion. The herbivores are the majority, so the carnivore's choice of a speaker is merely a formality. They have to play the game, after all. But the Smilodon carries with him not only the weight of his caucus, but the full weight of a long-standing paleontological mystery. Historians still argue whether the Parliament's rise was a gradual evolution or a revolutionary break from monarchical rule. This historical debate is a perfect parallel to the question of whether this parliamentary experiment is a new revolutionary idea or just the latest, most complex iteration of a simple power struggle between predator and prey. And then there's the quirky tidbit, the player who will be on the sidelines forgotten for much of the story. The scimitar cat Megatherium serum. While Smilodon is the showboating extrovert with its impossibly long canines, the scimitar cat is a less-known relative. Its canines are shorter, wider, and wait for it, retained their serrations, even as an adult, giving them the appearance of a steak knife. While Smilodon was built for ambush, hunting Megatherium was built more like a cheetah for long-range pursuits. As the Smilodon takes his place as speaker, you can't help but notice the scimitar cat sitting quietly in the back, a silent, serrated predator who seems to understand the long game better than anyone else. His presence is a quiet reminder that the most famous of a species isn't always the most effective. The stage is set. The Smilodon is speaker and animal with a conflicted past and a dubious social structure. The ground sloth will be the leader of the opposition, an animal of immense power and a slow, ponderous pace. And 100 other species, from the largest mammoth to the smallest ground sloth, are watching to see if this strange, beautiful, and utterly doomed experiment in government can save them. The Smilodon takes his place on a large, flat rock that serves as the speaker's dais. He is the presiding officer of the House, and his presence alone seems to still the chaos. He has been given the authority to administer the proceedings, recognize members to speak, and most importantly, preserve order and decorum. His role is a blend of institutional power and partisan leadership. He is the face of the Parliament, but he is also the leader of the carnivore faction. It's a high-wire act, balancing his duty to the body as a whole with his loyalty to his own kind. You see him eye the assembled herbivores, a silent threat in his gaze. This is where the debate over his social structure comes into play. Paleontologists still argue whether the saber-toothed cat was a solitary hunter, like a modern tiger, or a social cat like a lion. The discovery of fossils at Rancho La Brea showing serious healed injuries like broken bones and dislocated hips led some to believe they were social animals, arguing that such injuries would have been fatal for a lone hunter. It's the ultimate case for social health care. The carnivore faction uses this as a political talking point. Look at our speaker, they would argue. His very survival is a testament to the power of the pack. A solitary cat could never have survived such grievous injuries. The herbivores, of course, have a rebuttal. They point to the competing argument that cats use their metabolic reserves to heal quickly, and that dehydration, not starvation, would be a more profound limitation. They argue that the presence of healed injuries only proves that the animal was mobile enough to find water, and that the sheer abundance of Smilodon fossils at the tar pits is not a sign of social behavior, but a statistical quirk, a high sampling of solitary predators lured by the same carcass. For the herbivore bloc, this is a clear sign that the Smilodon is a self-interested solitary leader who cannot be trusted with the collective good. This is the great paradox of the Smilodon's leadership. His very body is a contradiction. He is built for brute force with a muscular frame and immense strength. His skull, however, was not designed to handle the pressure of biting through bone or holding on to struggling prey. His canines, while impressive, were fragile against sideways force. He is a biological war hammer, blunt and devastating, but with the fragility of a spear. This physical contradiction becomes his political weakness. The herbivores see him not as a strong leader, but as a specialist and anachronism. A leader who is strong only in a very specific, limited way, and whose very tools for survival are prone to snapping under pressure. It's a great light joke in a world of serious problems. He can't handle the pressure. A small horse whinnies from the back, and the crowd of herbivores roars with the laughter. His lack of a long tail, which modern cats use for balance, also makes him less agile than today's big cats. This lack of agility becomes a metaphor for his political inflexibility. He can charge forward in a powerful burst, but he can't turn quickly or adapt to a new political landscape. He's all or nothing, a powerful but blunt force. The speaker, the majestic. Smilodon is not a nimble, politically savvy leader. He is a force of nature, an ancient, powerful anachronism trying to run a modern, complicated government. His role as the speaker in this context is not just a ceremonial duty. It is an attempt to impose his primal will on a complex, dying world. The question of his true social nature, therefore, is not a distraction from the main story, but the very heart of it. Can a predator debated as a social or solitary creature truly lead a parliament of prey? Across the clearing, the opposition begins to stir. The Megatherium, a veritable mountain of shaggy fur and solid bone, ambles slowly forward. He is the leader of the herbivore majority, the prime minister in this strange primeval government. His role is to be the leader of His Majesty's government responsible for policy and decisions. He represents his constituents, the vast and varied body of plant eaters, and it is his solemn duty to hold the carnivore-led speaker accountable through parliamentary oversight. His every movement is a statement. He doesn't rush. He doesn't preen. He just moves, slowly with an unhurried, ponderous majesty. This deliberate pace is not a sign of weakness. It is a political strategy, a show of unshakable resolve. The carnivores watch with a mixture of impatience and quiet frustration. They want to rush the debate, to use their short-burst ambush style, to push their agenda through. The sloth, however, will not be rushed. His political style is a direct reflection of his biology. The very idea of a slow, docile giant is up for debate, with paleontologists still arguing about the true locomotion of ground sloths. Were they plodding, methodical creatures, or could they in fact move with surprising speed for short bursts, much like a modern elephant? The herbivores would argue that this is the point. The sloth's great strength is in his ability to be deliberate, to wait, to weigh every option before committing to a path. He's not slow, he's tactical. This is a deep philosophical split between the two factions. The Smilodon is the embodiment of the blitzkrieg hypothesis of extinction, a swift, aggressive, and overwhelming force. The Megatherium, in contrast, embodies the climate change hypothesis, a slow, inexorable, and environmental process that requires patience and adaptation. His platform, based on the principle that the problem is a lack of vegetation, is unyielding. His bones, you remember from the last section, hold the evidence of his exclusively vegetarian diet. He cannot compromise with the carnivores on the most fundamental issue, food. His body is his policy. He is the only large mammal in the assembly that doesn't even have the debate of whether it should eat meat or not. The science on that is settled. The ground sloth's physical defenses are also a powerful metaphor for his political persona. He is a walking fortress. His immense size alone makes him a difficult target. His large, curving claws are not for hunting, but for pulling down branches and, if necessary, defending against attack. And perhaps most importantly, some ground sloths possessed pebble-like osteoderms, bony plates embedded in their skin like a natural suit of chainmail. This is his hard shell, a physical representation of his unshakable principles. The carnivores can charge and roar all they want, but the sloth will simply stand his ground, a monument of defense. He's the opposite of the Smilodon's fragile canines. He is all defense, no offense. And then there is the peculiar, nerdy tidbit about his metabolism. It is debated whether ground sloths had a low metabolism like their modern relatives. Modern sloths, which are heterothermic, can have body temperatures that vary with the ambient temperature, making them quite sluggish. Ground sloths, however, likely had a higher and more stable body temperature, allowing them to be much more active. This is a great gentle joke. The carnivores think he's slow because he's lazy, but in fact he's just a creature of immense patient power. His sluggishness is a choice, not a limitation. He is a patient, deliberate leader representing the interests of a faction that believes in long-term solutions, not swift, fleeting ones. The Smilodon is a flashy, dangerous politician, but the Megatherium is the slow, unmovable bedrock of the assembly. With the two titans of the assembly now in their proper places, the rest of the parliament begins to organize itself. You can see the various factions huddled together, a microcosm of the Pleistocene world. A government, you see, is never a two-animal show. It is a grand, complicated, often ridiculous spectacle. There are two other key players who will shape this parliament. First, you have the mammoth bloc. These are the woolly mammoths and their relatives. You can hear their low rumbles and feel the earth shake beneath their enormous hairy frames. They are the old guard, the aristocracy of the Pleistocene, with a deep communal bond forged over millennia. Their social structure is similar to that of modern elephants. They live in herds with strong protective instincts toward their young and elderly. Their political style is a direct reflection of this. They are slow to act, but when they do, they are an unmovable, unified force. They represent the status quo, the old ways of life on the great steppes. They are a powerful but unyielding voting bloc, and their power is in their sheer, unthinking mass. Then there is the dire wolf coalition. They are everywhere, 100 gray-brown shapes with muscles rippling beneath their thick coats. Their skulls are shorter, stronger, and more robust than those of their cousins, the gray wolves, optimized for bone-crushing and grappling with large megafauna. This is a perfect political metaphor. While the gray wolf is an endurance hunter, a lightweight spear for chasing down nimble prey, the dire wolf is a warhammer, a blunt, devastating instrument of raw strength. Their political style is pure, unadulterated brute force. They are the shock troops of the carnivore faction, the ones who get things done by sheer intimidation and collective might. The rivalry between the dire wolf and the gray wolf is a fascinating one, and it is a perfect example of a deep, unseen political divide. The dire wolf, as a species, was a specialist adapted to a world filled with massive herbivores. The gray wolf, a smaller, more versatile creature, was a generalist capable of hunting both large and small prey. The dire wolves in our parliament are the embodiment of a failed evolutionary strategy, a group so specialized for the old world that they are unable to adapt to the new one. They are powerful in this moment, but you can feel that their power is fleeting. And now for our facts. The historical fact is a callback, you might remember, from a previous section. The word parliament, you remember, comes from the French parlement and the Latin parlamentum, which means to discuss. It's a fitting word for a body that, no matter how much it fights, must, at its core, discuss the issues. Historians still argue about the true social structure of dire wolves, but evidence from the La Brea tar pits suggests they, like their modern cousins, were highly social pack animals. This debate is an important part of the dire wolf coalition's political identity. They present themselves as a unified, impenetrable front. But are they? Finally, there's a quirky tidbit about a fringe member of the pack that isn't really a part of a pack at all, the short-faced bear Arctodus simus. It was a massive creature, larger than a modern grizzly or polar bear, but its remarkably long, thin legs and feet were adapted for efficient, long-distance pacing, not the explosive acceleration of a predator. It was a hunter that couldn't chase its prey. It's the ultimate freelancer, a silent, solitary political force that simply paces the edge of the assembly, watching the drama unfold. He is neither here nor there, a political oddity in a parliament built on clear-cut factions. The debate is about to begin. The air is thick with the dust of the assembled herd, and the rank scent of carnivores. The first bill is introduced, a momentous occasion in this fledgling government. The legislative process, a complex and often ridiculous dance, begins. The bill is an initiative from the herbivore faction, penned by a group of industrious giant beavers. They're not as glamorous as the sloths or mammoths, but they're the workhorses, the ones who actually write things down. Their bill is titled the Herbivore Sustainability Act, and it proposes a series of measures to conserve woody plants and replant grasses to combat the effects of climate change. The process is as follows. A member of the Sloth Party, a smaller Megalonyx, officially introduces the bill. It is assigned a number and labeled with the sponsor's name. The Smilodon as speaker then has to refer the bill to the appropriate committee. With a flash of his canines and a sly grin, he refers it to the Committee of Carnivores, a clever political move that essentially sends the bill to its death. The herbivores protest, but the speaker cites the fact that the bill will affect the entire ecosystem, and therefore requires the oversight of the carnivore faction. It's a classic parliamentary maneuver: bury the opposition's bill in an unfriendly committee. The committee's first step is to hold a markup session. This is where they make revisions and additions. The dire wolves with their bone-crushing jaws have a field day. They add a series of riders to the bill provisions that have nothing to do with the original legislation. They'll add clauses to legalize the hunting of specific species and to mandate a controlled hunt on the remaining herbivores. The original bill, you can see, is being stripped of its purpose, piece by piece, as the carnivores mark it up. The herbivores, of course, are horrified. They can't believe the carnivores are so blatantly corrupt. They're surprised by how openly the hunters have turned this legislative process into a power play. This is where the parliamentary system is both a beautiful and a terrible thing. Legal historians still argue whether the original purpose of parliamentary procedure was to facilitate decision-making or to create obstacles that protect minority rights. The herbivores would argue the carnivores are using it for the latter, creating obstacles, not to protect their rights, but to destroy the bill. The carnivores, with a flash of teeth and a low growl, would argue they're simply exercising their right to debate and amend. It's all in the rules. There's a quirky tidbit that gives the herbivores a moment of hope. If a bill is marked up with so many amendments that it is unrecognizable, the committee can order the introduction of a clean bill. This new bill will have a new number, and the old amended version is discarded. This is the herbivores' secret weapon. They hope the carnivores will so thoroughly corrupt the bill that they'll be forced to throw it out and start over. It's a fascinating display of political strategy. The carnivores are trying to kill the bill with amendments, but they might be forced to accidentally resurrect it. The historical fact of the day is that the legislative process requires an enormous amount of work and that the failure to act on a bill is equivalent to killing it. It's a slow, plodding, and often frustrating process. For the animals whose lives are measured in seasons and hunts, this bureaucratic slowness is a kind of torture. The great debate is now not about who is right, but about who can survive the long, tedious, and often corrupt process of a bill becoming law. The carnivores have a simple goal, but the herbivores with their meticulous plan seem to have the upper hand. For now, the chamber is in an uproar. The bill, mangled and unrecognizable from its original form, has been sent back to the main body for a vote. But a vote, the speaker reminds them, requires a quorum. A quorum is the minimum number of members that must be present before business can begin. For this parliament, it's a terrifying number. With a sudden realization, the speaker realizes that half the dire wolves have wandered off to a fresh carcass. The mammoths, meanwhile, are slowly migrating. It's a disaster. The speaker is forced to call for a call of the House. The purpose is to compel the attendance of absent members. He sends out the sergeant-at-arms, a wily and muscular, short-faced bear with surprisingly long legs to round them up. You watch as the bear, built for efficient, long-distance pacing, trots off into the distance, a futile errand, if ever there was one. How do you compel a 14-foot-tall mammoth to come back to a boring meeting? It's an exercise in parliamentary procedure that reveals the deep-seated disconnect between these beasts and the government they're trying to build. The chaos continues. The herbivores, now with a numerical advantage, attempt to filibuster. They can speak for as long as they want, effectively talking a measure to death. The most effective filibusterer is a ponderous, woolly mammoth. He stands on his massive legs and bellows for hours on end, his trunk, swinging his voice a low, unending drone. He doesn't need to make sense. He just needs to take up time. The carnivores howl and snarl, but the speaker, bound by the rules, cannot stop him. The parliamentary process, which they so gleefully used to kill the bill in committee, is now being used against them. The historical fact is that parliamentary procedure is built on a few core principles. Every member has the right to participate and speak. Only one thing motion can be discussed at a time, and there must be a quorum present to make a decision. For this parliament, with its chaotic factions and wandering members, these rules are more of a guideline. The very idea of a debate with these animals is a light joke. You can imagine a dire wolf, impatient with the process, simply walking up to the podium and using its bone-crushing jaws to amend the speaker's rock. Historians still argue about whether the rules of parliamentary procedure, such as those established in Robert's Rules of Order, truly facilitate debate or simply create a tool for obstruction and political maneuvering. The dire wolves would argue the latter. They'd say this whole thing is a sham, a waste of time. They believe in the power of a single decisive vote, not in endless plodding debate. The mammoths, however, would be firm proponents of the slow, deliberate pace. They believe that their sheer mass and stubbornness is their greatest political asset. The quirky tidbit is the call of the House itself. A sergeant-at-arms is sent out to round up missing members. You can picture the hapless, short-faced bear trotting from one end of the clearing to the other, trying to coax a sleepy giant sloth from its burrow or a cunning saber-toothed cat from its hunting grounds. The job is a complete failure. The parliament, unable to reach a quorum, is forced to adjourn without a vote. This is the first great failure of the Pleistocene parliament. Their biggest obstacle wasn't the carnivores or the herbivores. It was the rules themselves. The Parliament has devolved into a standoff. The legislative process has become a game of pure obstruction. The herbivores will not consent to a vote on their bill, which is now a carnivore's manifesto. The carnivores, unable to muster a quorum, cannot force the issue. This is where the true political ideologies so closely tied to their primal behaviors emerge. The carnivores' political strategy is a direct reflection of their hunting techniques. The dire wolves, with their pack-based social structure, use brute force. They rely on their numbers and their immense strength to take down large prey. Politically, this means they operate as a single, unyielding voting bloc, their presence alone a form of intimidation. They don't engage in subtle debate. They simply mass their numbers and demand a vote. It's the blitzkrieg hypothesis in action. They believe that a rapid, overwhelming force is the only way to solve the extinction crisis, whether that force is hunting prey or passing a bill. The Smilodon, on the other hand, is an ambush predator. His political strategy is a reflection of this. He doesn't charge into the open. He operates from the shadows. He makes deals in the back rooms, cajoling and threatening, trying to peel off members of the herbivore faction one by one. His lack of a long tail, which modern cats use for balance, makes him an unstable force, both physically and politically. He is a politician without balance, prone to extreme, all-or-nothing moves. The herbivores would argue that his political moves are as fragile as his canines, prone to snapping under the pressure of open debate. He's all about the surprise attack, a swift, brutal strike meant to end the debate before it can even begin. This is where the debate over hunting techniques becomes a political metaphor. Scientists still argue about the true hunting techniques of the saber-toothed cat, specifically how it could take down a large, struggling herbivore without breaking its fragile canines. The herbivores would say this is his ultimate flaw. He's a powerful predator who can't handle a struggle. He can't engage in the messy, prolonged process of legislative debate because his political weapons, his canines, are too fragile. He needs to end the fight quickly and cleanly, just as he would in a hunt. The historical fact of the day is the concept of parliamentary oversight, which is the process of holding the government accountable for the policies it implements. The herbivores attempt to do this by demanding an audit of the carnivores' hunting practices. They want to know how many animals are being hunted and whether the carnivores are targeting the same species that are suffering from the changing climate. This is their way of forcing a debate on the core issue. Are the carnivores part of the problem or the solution? There's a small, quirky detail that highlights the Smilodon's physical and political limitations. While he can roar thanks to the size and shape of his hyoid bone, his skull isn't built to hold on to struggling prey. He can bellow, he can use his voice to command attention, but he lacks the raw physical power to hold his opponent. The herbivores see this. They understand that his roar is all bluster, and that if they stand their ground, he cannot physically hold them. It's a game of chicken, with the future of the Pleistocene hanging in the balance. The carnivores are a force of nature, a terrifying embodiment of the overkill hypothesis. But the herbivores are the quiet, unyielding, and patient force of the climate. And in a parliamentary standoff, patience might just be the most dangerous weapon of all. The parliament has reached a state of frozen gridlock. The speaker, the Smilodon, is furious. The prime minister, the Megatherium, is placidly chewing on a leaf. The legislative process has failed. A ceremonialist, an ancient mastodon with a single, immense, curved tusk, slowly ambles to the center of the chamber. This is the mace, a symbol of royal authority. Without it, the parliament cannot pass laws. The mastodon carries it on its right shoulder, a single polished tusk, and places it on the table in front of the speaker. The mace is a physical manifestation of the power of the government. This is a deep-seated historical fact about parliaments. The mace is the symbol of the powers and privileges of the House. It is a symbol of authority, and its presence signifies that the House is officially in session and its deliberations are legitimate. In this Pleistocene parliament, the mace is not made of silver gilt. It is a single, immense, woolly mammoth tusk, polished to a pearly sheen. You can almost feel the weight of history in it, a tool of a vanished age. It is carried by a designated sergeant-at-arms, the short-faced bear, who bears it on his right shoulder as he enters the chamber with the speaker. The mace's placement is a key piece of parliamentary tradition and a perfect metaphor for the power dynamics at play. When the speaker is in the chair, the mace is placed on the table. But when the parliament goes into a less formal committee, the mace is moved to two brackets underneath the table. The carnivores would see this as a glorious opportunity. They'd use the committee stage to operate outside the formalities of the main session to make deals and amendments away from the gaze of the herbivores. With the mace hidden beneath the table, the power of the speaker is diminished, and the true ugly nature of the politics can be revealed. It's a political sleight of hand, a move that only the most cunning of the predators would understand. Historians still argue about whether the mace is the symbol of the speaker's authority or if it is a symbol of the crown's authority. It's a debate that pits the power of the presiding officer against the power of the state. For our parliament, this debate is a fierce one. The Smilodon would argue that the mace is a symbol of his authority, a sign that he, the speaker, is in charge. The mammoths, however, would argue that the tusk is a symbol of the great overarching authority of the ecosystem, a power that supersedes any temporary government. It's a fascinating, nuanced debate that's lost on most of the animals who just see a large, shiny tusk. There is a quirky but telling tidbit that reinforces this idea. During the state opening of Parliament in Britain, when the monarch is in the chamber, the mace is absent from the Lords. The monarch's authority supersedes that of the Parliament. For our Pleistocene Parliament, this would mean that in the presence of the great ancient woolly mammoth, the speaker's mace would be removed. The power of the old guard would supersede the power of the new government. It's a quiet, humbling tradition that reminds every member of the assembly who truly holds the final authority. It is a light joke on the fragility of power, a reminder that the most powerful of animals can still be humbled by the forces of history and tradition. The Parliament, for all its power and bluster, is just a temporary solution to a permanent problem, and the mace, for all its ceremonial glory, is just a piece of bone. The legislative deadlock continues. The Speaker, the Smilodon, is exasperated. The Prime Minister, the Megatherium, is in a meditative state. The Parliament, in a final desperate move, establishes a new branch of government, the judiciary. The court, in a move of brutal irony, is established at the Rancho La Brea tar pits, the very site where so many of them met their demise. It is a place of primal law where the most basic questions of life and death are answered in a sticky black embrace. The first case before the court is a doozy. It is the tar pit trespass case, a lawsuit brought by a dire wolf against a saber-toothed cat. The dire wolf claims that the Smilodon lured him to a trapped carcass, a clear act of predatory entrapment. The Smilodon argues that the carcass was a public good, and that the dire wolf was simply a foolish opportunist. The court must decide if a trap is a legal snare or a natural hazard. It's a fascinating legal question that has its roots in a central scholarly debate. Paleontologists still argue whether the high density of carnivores found in the La Brea tar pits represents social hunters or simply a high sampling of solitary predators drawn by the same lure. The dire wolves in their testimony argue that their high numbers in the pits are a sign of their social nature. They were there, they claim, to help their trapped comrades. The Smilodon argues that they were there for the same reason he was to feed on an easy trapped meal. The Prime Minister of the ground sloth is called as a witness. He testifies that the tar pits are a predatory lure and that any animal who uses them is engaging in an act of profound disrespect for the dead. The court, a jury of small, insignificant rodents and birds, listens in stunned silence. The historical fact is that in a parliamentary system, the judicial function is typically independent of the legislative and executive branches. This independence is a crucial part of the process, ensuring that the law is applied fairly without political bias. For our Pleistocene court, this means the judges must decide the case based on the facts, not on their allegiance to the carnivores or the herbivores. The Chief Justice, a wise old woolly mammoth, bangs his immense foot on the ground, a loud resounding thud that shakes the entire court. The case is decided on a quirky but irrefutable piece of evidence. The defense, the Smilodon, argues that the high concentration of carnivores in the pits is proof of a social gathering. The prosecution, the dire wolf, calls a witness a tiny golden eagle. The eagle's lawyer points to the fact that the remains of the non-social golden eagle are about as common in the tar pits as the remains of the saber-toothed cat. This single devastating fact destroys the Smilodon's argument. If the tar pits were a social hub for carnivores, why would a solitary predator like the golden eagle be so common? The court, with a silent consensus, finds the Smilodon guilty. The verdict sends a shockwave through the parliament. The carnivores are furious. The herbivores are triumphant. But the victory is a fleeting one. The court has settled the legal question, but the primal political question remains. Can a government built on the principles of law and order survive in a world where the most powerful animals still believe in the law of the jungle? The answer, you realize, is written in the very ground they stand on, in the sticky blackness of the tar pits, a monument to a world that was always and will always be brutal and unforgiving. The defeat in the court of tar pits is a major blow for the carnivore faction. Their political platform, built on the premise of a shared social purpose, is in shambles. The herbivores are emboldened. But just as they prepare to take control of the legislative agenda, a new, more terrifying problem emerges. It is a creeping, invisible threat that spreads through the parliament like a silent whisper. The Hyper-Disease Party, a fringe group of conspiracy theorists and paranoid mastodons, has been vindicated. There is a sickness in the air. This is the hyperdisease hypothesis, an ancient theory proposed by Ross McPhee and Preston Marks that suggests a new, highly virulent disease brought by the new human arrivals is racing through the native megafauna populations. The disease, they argue, has a few key features. It must be able to infect multiple species without seriously harming its human carrier. It must have a high infection rate and a high lethality, 50-75% mortality, and it must have a stable carrier state in a reservoir species. It is the ultimate invisible enemy, a biological weapon that the animals have no defense against. The parliament is in a state of mass panic. The carnivores, who had so gleefully argued for a controlled hunt to end the extinction crisis, are now powerless against a threat they can't see or smell. The herbivores, who had been focused on replanting grasses, are now terrified of a plague that could kill them all before they even have a chance to eat. It is a terrifying paradox. Their political system is built on a foundation of open debate and physical confrontation. But this new threat is quiet, deadly, and indiscriminate. The political response is a mess. The speaker of the Smilodon calls for a quarantine, but no one knows who is infected or where the disease came from. The Prime Minister of the Megatherium urges his followers to stay calm and to trust the scientific process, but no one has any science to offer. The hyperdisease is a political problem with no political solution. It is the ultimate equalizer, a silent predator that preys on all of them regardless of their political affiliation. It's a light joke that's not so funny anymore. You can't filibuster a virus, bellows a desperate mammoth. Scientists still debate the existence of a hyperdisease, noting that despite a prodigious effort, no clues of such a pathogen have ever been found in megafaunal bones. The lack of evidence for the hypothesis is a central argument against it. But for the animals in our story, the lack of evidence is even more terrifying. It means the enemy is a ghost, an invisible killer that leaves no trace. It is a fear that feeds on itself, a paranoia that spreads faster than any disease. There is a small, quirky detail that lends a chilling sense of reality to this fictional plague. According to one study, the burgeoning ability of Asian bird flu to infect across species boundaries suggests that some diseases are ecologically and genetically preordained to go hyper. For the animals in our parliament, this means that a single innocent cough from a human could be the beginning of their end. The parliament, so concerned with the big, obvious threats of hunting and climate change, never considered that a new species could bring with it an entirely new kind of danger. Their political system, so focused on the physical, is now utterly useless in the face of an invisible biological one. The end is not coming in a charge or a flood. It is coming in a whisper. The parliament has collapsed. The invisible threat of the hyperdisease has shattered their fragile coalition. They are scattered, each faction huddling together, afraid to get too close. The legislative session, a great, long-winded affair, is coming to a close. The herbivores, in a final desperate act, propose a vote on their original bill, the Herbivore Sustainability Act. But the bill has been so thoroughly amended by the Committee of Carnivores that it now calls for a controlled hunt on a number of key herbivore species. The speaker, the Smilodon, is gleeful. He has his victory. The Prime Minister of the Megatherium is enraged. He rises slowly, his immense form a mountain of fury. He calls for a no-confidence vote, a final, desperate move to dissolve the parliament and end the speaker's reign. The vote is a nail-biter. The dire wolf coalition, with their powerful, bone-crushing jaws, votes in lockstep with the speaker. The mammoths, slow to act, but finally seeing the danger, throw their immense weight behind the sloth. The small, forgotten species, the rodents, and the birds scurry to vote on one side or the other. It's a game of numbers, and the final tally is agonizingly close. The vote fails. The parliament dissolves. It's an anticlimax, an anticlimactic end to a grand and terrible experiment in government. It wasn't a great battle or a sudden catastrophe that killed them. It was a failure of will, a failure of cooperation. Their inability to find a common solution, to rise above their primal instincts, was their ultimate undoing. They spent so much time arguing about who was to blame, they never found a way to work together. This is the great, terrible historical debate that haunts the end of the Pleistocene. It is debated whether the extinction was a result of a single cause or a combination of factors with climate change, human hunting, and disease all playing a role. For our parliament, the answer is clear. It was a combination of all three. They were a microcosm of the world around them. The carnivores' overkill policies led to a scarcity of prey. The herbivores' climate change platform was too slow to address the immediate crisis. And the hyper-disease of their political infighting, their inability to trust each other, sealed their fate. There's a quiet, chilling detail that makes this ending even more tragic. The extinction event and the shift to a more seasonal climate was punctuated by a brief but intense return to glacial conditions known as the Younger Dryas. It was a final cold breath from a dying world. For our parliament, this would be the final blow, a brief return to the old ways, a desperate last-ditch attempt to save themselves by reverting to old instincts. But it's too late. The mammoths are too slow to adapt. The sloths are too big to survive. The saber-toothed cats are too specialized to hunt new prey. Their great political experiment has failed, and now they must face the consequences, not as a collective, but alone. You watch as the animals scatter. The dire wolves slink back to their packs. The mammoths trudge on toward a colder, more inhospitable land. The speaker, the Smilodon, stalks off into the forest, a solitary predator once more. The Prime Minister, the Megatherium, ambles slowly toward a grove of trees, a lonely monument to a peaceful, vanishing world. The Parliament is over. The great debate is done. And the only thing left to do is to wait for the end. You watch from your hiding place as the final lonely members of the Pleistocene Parliament vanish into the mist. The great gathering is over. The debates, the votes, the impassioned speeches, and the brutal betrayals, they are all just faint echoes on the wind. The landscape returns to a quiet, terrifying silence. It is a silence that would last for thousands of years. The Pleistocene epoch has ended, and with it, an entire world of magnificent giants. The great extinction event, the one that the animals so desperately tried to stop with laws and deliberations, has come to pass. The theories still remain, of course. Was it the overkill, the blitzkrieg hypothesis that argues a rapid, efficient human hunting style was the primary driver of extinction? Perhaps. There is evidence that humans and megafauna coexisted for thousands of years and that humans rarely hunted the extinct species. But perhaps their predatory pressure was just enough to tip the balance to push an already stressed ecosystem past the point of no return. Or was it the climate change? The slow, inevitable warming that caused the great steppes to vanish to be replaced by waterlogged swamps and less nutritious plants. The evidence for this is undeniable. The ecosystem changed, and the animals with their massive bodies and specific diets were unable to adapt quickly enough. The debate between these two theories is endless, a kind of scholarly filibuster that continues to this day. Historians still argue about the precise feedback mechanisms that amplified the relatively small climatic shifts caused by planetary orbital cycles into the full-blown ice ages and interglacial periods. And what about the other theories? The hyperdisease that was never found, the invisible killer that no one could prove or disprove. The final truth you realize is that it wasn't one thing. It was all of them. The Great Extinction was a perfect storm, a confluence of environmental change, human encroachment, and the political inability of the great beasts to rise above their primal nature. They couldn't save themselves, not with laws, not with debates, not with parliaments. The final historical fact is perhaps the most humbling. The extinction wasn't absolute. While most of the great beasts vanished, a few managed to cling to life. A small population of woolly mammoths survived on Wrangel Island in the Arctic until about 4,000 years ago, long after their mainland relatives were gone. They lived on a tiny, isolated remnant of a vanished world. It's a testament to life's resilience, but it's also a bittersweet reminder of what was lost. And the quirk that puts it all into perspective. The Steller's sea cow, a massive marine mammal, was discovered in 1741 by a naturalist. Within just 27 years of its discovery, it was extinct, hunted to oblivion by humans. It didn't have a parliament. It didn't have a long-winded debate. It just vanished. It reminds you that some stories don't need a grand narrative. They just end. The mist around you is now a soft gray twilight. The sounds of the ancient world fade into a gentle hum. There are no more roars, no more growls, no more bellowing speeches. There is only the soft rustle of leaves on the wind and the faint, sleepy sound of a fan in the background. The great beasts are gone. All that remains are their bones, their stories, and the questions we still ask thousands of years later in the quiet dark. And with that, our journey comes to a peaceful end. The air is cool, the world is quiet, you are safe. Close your eyes. Sweet dreams.